Hey guys, tonight we travel somewhere warm to warm, honestly. You're standing in the golden light of a late afternoon sun that never quite softens, even when it dips low over the Nile. Papyrus reeds rustle nearby, and sand crunches beneath your sandals. You're sticky with sweat, but no one else seems to mind. Why? Because you're in ancient Egypt and trust me, your comfort is not the priority. The year? Unclear. Somewhere around the 18th dynasty, give or take a hieroglyph. You're on palace grounds. You can smell the incense curling from temple braziers. Hear the slap of guards' sandals on polished limestone, and in the distance, the low, lazy growl of sacred cats sunbathing where they definitely shouldn't be. This is the world of divine kings and bloodline obsessions. A world where marriage isn't always about love or even politics. Sometimes, it's just about genetics, or more accurately, keeping power locked inside a single family. And if that means marrying your own daughter, well, let's just say, eyebrows weren't raised. Not unless the makeup artist forgot to paint them on that morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking beside a palace wall now. The sandstone is warm under your fingers, carved with scenes of a pharaoh smiting enemies in that signature sideways pose, body twisted, like he's dancing, but always with the fist raised. You pause by a window. Behind the latticework, voices murmur, a priest reciting lineages, a queen correcting a pronunciation, a child giggling before being hushed out inside. A ceremony is being planned. And it's not just any ceremony. It's a wedding, one of the grandest in the land. But the guest list is oddly short, because the groom is the reigning pharaoh and the bride is his daughter. Yep, you heard that right. Now, let's not panic. To modern ears, this sounds like a Dateline special waiting to happen. But in ancient Egypt, the rules were different. The royal family wasn't just a political institution. They were living gods, children of Ra, Horus, Osiris, pick your celestial lineage, and gods, as the priest liked to remind everyone, often married their sisters, or their daughters, or both. So when Pharaoh Thutmose I, for example, married his daughter Hatshepsut, yes, that Hatshepsut, no one blinked. When Ramses II married not one but four of his daughters, people mostly just admire the embroidery on the wedding garments. It's about purity, you see, not in a ritual sense but in a dynastic one. Marrying outside the royal line meant inviting lesser blood into the throne. And that's not something a god king could afford, especially not when your legitimacy rests on whether or not the high priest feel like cooperating with your reign. You pass into a courtyard now. Date palms sway overhead. A musician strums a harp, half asleep in the shade. A servant walks past carrying a tray of wine diluted with lotus water. The air is heavy with myrrh and gossip. You hear it in fragments. She's only 13, her mother arranged it. They say he built her a garden shaped like the eye of Horus. The bride in question is nearby. You see her from a distance, thin, regal, eyes ringed in black kohl. Hands to still for a girl her age. She's learning to walk like a queen, not just poised, but sculptural. Like someone who'll someday be carved into limestone by people who never knew her real face. You're not the only one watching. Court officials line the edges of the courtyard, faces unreadable, all calculating what this marriage means for their power, their sons, their cousins. Because where the pharaoh puts his crown, fortunes rise or crumble. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ramses II really did marry several of his own daughters, including Bintinith and possibly Meritamen. It's on the official stele, and their names appear alongside his in various temples. It wasn't even unprecedented. From the Old Kingdom onward, pharaohs used marriage to daughters or sisters as a tool to consolidate power. But here's your weird little side note. Egyptian poetry from this era is shockingly romantic, full of longing. Metaphors about lotus blossoms and moonlit canals. Some fragments describe secret rendezvous in temple gardens. Whether these were metaphorical, fictional, or very real affairs whispered into history, no one knows. But it adds a strange layer to a society we often reduce to stone monuments and rigid laws. Back in the palace, the wedding begins. There's no white dress, no nervous I do. Just a series of offerings to the gods, chants in an ancient tongue, and a moment where a father lays a gold necklace on his daughter's shoulders. Is it affection, duty, a performance? You can't tell, neither can she. Later, there's a feast. Ducks roasted with honey, pomegranate wine, dancers with braided wigs. The pharaoh sits at the head of the table, daughter-wife beside him. and the whole court raises their cups. You try not to think too hard about the layers of power and silence laced into this toast. Historians still argue whether these marriages were ceremonial only or fully consummated. Some claim it was more about optic symbols of divine order. Others say the evidence suggests real marital unions, complete with children. The truth is probably somewhere between uncomfortable practicality and sacred ritual. Egypt was good at mixing the two. And here's the part no one mentions in the official histories: not every daughter got a choice. You see one now, a girl in a side chamber, watching the feast through a carved screen. Her face is unreadable, but her fingers twist a bit of linen in her lap. Maybe she envies the bride. Maybe she dreads being next. As the music swells and dancers leap in unison, you step away from the noise, back out into the quiet garden. Crickets chirp. A crocodile blinks from the reflecting pool. Overhead, stars begin to bloom in the velvet sky, silent witnesses to a dynasty that would rather fold on itself than let power slip away. You lie on the cool stone bench, the air thick with blooming lotus. Somewhere deep in the palace, the royal bloodline has just completed another circle. Whether that's triumph or tragedy, well, that's still up for debate. You're already up before dawn. The palace walls haven't yet absorbed the heat, and everything is hushed except the scribes, who are never quiet. Their reed pens scratch furiously on papyrus, keeping track of royal gifts, priestly schedules, and exactly how many loaves of bread the vizier's cousin borrowed this week. You trail behind a line of servants heading toward the royal baths, each carrying jars of perfumed oils and alabaster bowls filled with rosewater. But the princess is no longer just a daughter. She's now the great wife, a title bestowed upon the pharaoh's chief consort. The catch? She's still got homework. Yes, even queens in training are expected to recite hymns, learn temple protocols, and pretend to enjoy lessons about seasonal crop rotations. The old tutor with the gold tooth keeps quizzing her on ceremonial phrases in Middle Egyptian, which she mumbles through between bites of honey-dipped dates. You sit in the corner of the lesson chamber, half listening, watching her rehearse the official prayers she's expected to recite at tonight's temple offering. It's hard to tell whether she's absorbing it or just parroting syllables like a bored actress. When she stumbles over a phrase invoking Hathor, goddess of love and motherhood, the tutor clicks his tongue, and she rolls her eyes behind his back. The palace feels more like a maze than a home. Long corridors decorated with lotus mosaics, incense burners that never stop smoking, and a different servant posted at every corner like statues come to life. Each person here has a role, a title, a whisper of ambition stitched into their linen robes, including her mother, the Queen Dowager. You catch a glimpse of her now seated in her private chamber, draped in lapis and gold, calmly sipping pomegranate wine as she listens to the palace steward recite tomorrow's festival plans. The real power behind the power, some say. The one who suggested, ever so gently, that her daughter was ready to become the great wife. That's your first hint that this union wasn't entirely the pharaoh's idea. There's a strange stillness to the way power moves here. Nobody shouts, no one storms into a room. People make things happen with carefully folded letters, subtly placed gifts, and conversations that seem meaningless until 3 weeks later, when someone is reassigned to the granary at Elephantine. The great wife is paraded before temple priests that afternoon, barefoot on polished tiles, hands full of lilies. You follow the procession past hieroglyphs that seem to glow in the heat. Her makeup is flawless, her expression serene, but her fingers twitch behind her ceremonial fan. The girl behind the goddess is still in there, somewhere. Mainstream historical fact time: Egyptian royal women held tremendous ceremonial importance. The god's wife of Ammon position, for instance, wasn't just a title, it came with wealth, land, and religious clout. Hatshepsut used it to climb her way to the pharaoh's throne. And many royal daughters, once married to their fathers, gain more than titles, they gain leverage. But here's your quirky detail. Some noble women kept trained monkeys as companions. And not just as pets, these creatures were often dressed, perfumed, and fed better than most junior scribes. One rumor suggests a pharaoh's daughter once had hers buried in a miniature sarcophagus, complete with amulets. Meanwhile, back in your corner of the palace, things get a little tense. The younger wives of the pharaoh, yes, there are others, aren't thrilled. One especially ambitious royal concubine keeps accidentally bumping into the new great wife's attendants. Her kohl is darker now, her perfume more aggressive. She's working angles. Every smile hides a dagger. Behind closed doors, the palace whispers like a reed in wind. You overhear servants gossiping about the latest festival seating chart. Who's been placed next to the pharaoh? Who's been quietly moved 3 cushions down? A subtle change, but it speaks volumes. And in the shadows, the priests are keeping score. Some favor the great wife. Others still back the concubines from noble families in Thebes. Still others just want to avoid scandal. A pharaoh marrying his daughter. Sure. Tradition. But only just. Push it too far, and even sacred custom starts to crack. Historians still argue whether some of these father-daughter marriages were legally recognized as full unions, or mostly symbolic. The lack of personal letters or diary-style records leaves a frustrating gap. What we know is filtered through stelae, tomb paintings, and temple carvings, all designed to impress, not confess. At dinner, the atmosphere is thick with unspoken tension. The pharaoh laughs a little too loudly. The great wife smiles just enough. The concubines sip their wine like it's a test. Someone knocks over a silver dish of grapes, and you swear half the room flinches. You notice something, though. The prince's stern wife is starting to understand the game. Her posture is straighter. Her commands to servants firmer. She knows who not to speak to, who to flatter, who to ignore. Outside, the moon hangs over the Nile like a silver coin. You walk the quiet gardens, under date palms, and listen to the croak of distant frogs. This palace, this family, this marriage, it's all a performance. And she's just begun to memorize her lines. And then you hear it, not shouting but quiet crying. Somewhere down a hallway, you hesitate, then step back into shadow. You weren't meant to hear that, but you'll remember it, because in this world of painted eyes and polished gold, even queens are allowed a few cracks in the mask, so long as no one sees them. The Nile mist rolling just before sunrise, curling like fingers over the palace balcony. You lean on a cool stone railing, watching barges drift past with their sails down, floating like sleeping beasts in the water. Somewhere below, a priest is already chanting morning hymns to Ra, voiced low and rhythmic like the palace's own heartbeat. You glance over your shoulder. The great wife is already awake again. She barely sleeps now. Some nights she sits upright in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling beams carved with lotus vines, eyes open but far away. Royal dreams aren't peaceful ones. This morning, she's dressing not in the pale linen of ceremony, but in traveling garb, the kind used when visiting temples along the river or inspecting fields owned by the royal household. You're headed to a holy site today, and not just any one, the temple of Hathor at Dendera, goddess of love, fertility, and divine motherhood. You sense the symbolism is very much not accidental. Your barge cuts through the river, gilded prow glinting in the rising light. Temple musicians greet the party with tambourines and reed flutes, playing a tune older than most pyramids. Locals bow, priest bow. Even the stray goats seem to get the memo. Inside the temple courtyard, everything is heavy with incense and heat. The great wife, your queen, your charge, your walking bundle of contradictions, kneels before a statue of Hathor. It's an ancient piece, carved with a soft, cow-eared face that makes the goddess feel oddly maternal and yet eternal, like she knows all your secrets but forgives them anyway. And here comes the twist. The chief priest performing the rite. He's not some aged scholar with a bent back and a staff. He's young, barely older than the queen herself. And when their eyes meet, you feel a ripple pass through the air so subtly that it might just be imagination, or hope, or something more dangerous. You try not to look twice, but he does. His name, at least what you catch, is Murnu. His robes are simple, but the way he carries himself says he's used to being watched, and not just by gods. When he chants the sacred verses, he doesn't just recite, he performs. And when the great wife presents the ceremonial milk offering, their hands almost touch. You'd think it was nothing, unless you were watching closely. Back in the palace, things grow quieter but not calmer. The pharaoh is increasingly occupied with border affairs, meeting emissaries from Euboea, scribes trailing behind with scrolls longer than your arm. There are rumors of drought in the east, minor skirmishes near Byblos, but the real tension simmers closer to home. The concubines are restless. One's been seen whispering to a high priest from Karnak. Another has started making grand donations to the temple of Thoth, carefully documented ones. Of course, everyone's gathering allies. And the great wife, she's writing letters. You find her in the library wing, where the papyrus rolls never stop multiplying. She sits in a corner with a small oil lamp and two wax tablets. The letter she drafts isn't addressed to a foreign king or a noble cousin. It's to the temple at Dendera. That same priest Murnu is mentioned. Just a thank you, she says. Just a note of gratitude for a beautiful ceremony. But she signs it herself. Not with her royal seal, but with a personal mark, a stylized ink, drawn with a slight tilt like a secret smile. You begin to wonder, how far can a look go? A name written in wax? A visit to a shrine? In a palace ruled by rituals, even tiny acts can become seismic. Mainstream historical fact here, Egypt's priesthood wasn't just religious, it was political. Temples controlled land, labor, even armies. And while high priests were sworn to celibacy or strict codes, lower-ranking clergy had more leeway. Some were even known to maintain families in secret or flirt with minor nobles, boundaries blurred. And now for your oddity of the day. Ancient Egyptians believed writing had magical power. Not metaphorical literal. To write something down was to make it real. That's why even the destruction of a name carved into stone was seen as a kind of soul death. So her letter? It's more than words. It's a spell. You start noticing new rhythms to her days. A longer bath in the morning, a different perfume, spicier, less floral, and every so often, a new flower arrangement placed near her window, always containing blue lotus, symbol of rebirth, a flirtation, of secrets unfolding under moonlight. Historians still argue whether these royal women had room for personal passion, or whether every action was tightly bound to power and duty. The evidence is slippery. There are hints in tomb inscriptions, veiled metaphors in poetry, even scratched graffiti in temples that might refer to forbidden liaisons. But it's always just out of reach, like a shadow flickering at the edge of a torch. And then one night, the princess queen, your queen, goes missing. Not far, not long, just long enough. You're halfway through checking inventory with a steward when word reaches you. She's been seen near the palace aviary alone. But when you get there, she's not alone. Murnu is there too. They're speaking softly, no touching, no grand confessions, just words, but the intensity in the space between them is almost unbearable. You retreat without being seen. Later that night, she says nothing, eats nothing, just stands at her balcony, looking out over the dark gardens. When she finally speaks, her voice is level, like she's commenting on the weather. The gods give us roles, she says, but sometimes the heart misbehaves. And that's when it hits you. This might not just be a flirtation. This might be war. Not the kind with chariots and spears, the kind fought behind closed doors, with loyalties tested and oaths twisted. Because in Egypt, when a queen's heart shifts, entire dynasties tremble. The walls of the tomb are colder than you'd expect. You run your fingers across the painted figures, gods with jackal heads, lion-headed goddesses, bolts full of stars, and they seem to shiver under your touch. Everything in here is a performance. Everything is meant to be seen, remembered, worshipped. And yet, some things have been carefully, deliberately left out. You're in the Valley of the Kings now, not as a guest, but as someone tracing clues. The great wife has changed, not openly but in ways you feel in your bones. Her movements are sharper, her words chosen more carefully, her perfume more guarded. The once lavish feasts grow fewer, the late-night harpists dismissed early. Something is winding tighter beneath her skin. Then, one afternoon, you're summoned to a chamber not usually opened. It's near the scribe's hall, where the air is always thick with ink and beeswax. A scroll has been found. Not a royal decree, not a temple hymn, but a personal account. Half-burned, damaged, hidden inside a cracked wooden box that was meant for storing perfume cones. You unroll it carefully. The handwriting is delicate, slanted left, female. It doesn't name names, but it speaks of longing in temple courtyards, of prayers whispered under starlight, of a woman torn between her duty to the divine and her need for something deeply human. One line stands out: I belong to the gods, but my soul visits another altar. The scribe who shows it to you says it's likely a devotional poem, but you aren't so sure. You remember our friend Murnu. He's been reassigned, quietly. Some say it was voluntary. Others say the Pharaoh ordered it, claiming the priests needed to seek solitude in the desert sanctuary of Karga. Either way, he's gone. And the queen hasn't smiled in weeks. There's no scandal yet, but gossip flows faster than the Nile in flood season. One of the senior concubines, an ambitious woman with a fondness for crocodile skin sandals, has begun hinting that the great wife spends too much time praying, too much time alone. She's careful not to accuse, just enough to stir the waters. Historians still argue whether this was when the great wife began keeping a personal diary. What little of it remains is fragmented, scratched onto portraits and tucked inside wall crevices near her private chapel. One line from those fragments seems particularly telling. When he spoke, the air inside me changed shape. And here's where things get even murkier. A limestone relief in a lesser-known tomb nearby shows a woman named kneeling before Hathor. Her face turned not toward the goddess, but toward a mortal man in priestly robes. Scholars debate whether it's artistic liberty, or some scandal quietly immortalized by a rebellious artisan. Some believe this unnamed woman was the same queen you serve. Others argue it's metaphor and allegory for temptation. But you're not dealing in metaphor. You're dealing in damage control, because a new scroll has just surfaced, found in the archives of a provincial temple far from Thebes. Its contents are copied from an original that no longer exists, and yet it reads like gossip set to poetry. It tells of a daughter of the sun god who defied her own bloodline, who wrote secret verses and sent them by boat to a lover she could never name. Your heart stumbles as you reach the final verse. Let my name be cut from stone, but remembered, in breath. Back in the palace, repairs have begun on a collapsed wall in one of the lesser chambers. Workers chip away at plaster, revealing older murals beneath. One shows the pharaoh and his great wife sitting on twin thrones, their feet resting on carved symbols of conquered enemies. She wears the vulture headdress, he the crown of Upper Egypt. But here's the odd part. Behind the throne, a third figure has been painted over. The outline remains faint long robes, a head partially shaved in the priestly style. It's subtle, nearly invisible unless you're looking. But it's their dot, and so are the chisels. Someone has tried to erase him. Mainstream fact time. Ancient Egyptians literally erased people from history by defacing their images, names, and titles, believing this destroyed their afterlife. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, even Hatshepsut were victims of such campaigns. But sometimes, the erasure leaves clues more revealing than the original art. In one of her final acts as queen, your great wife visits the House of Life, the scriptoria, where all royal records are stored. She brings a single scroll, not an official one, just personal. She asks the high scribe to keep it safe, but unread. Of course, it gets read. Everything gets read. That's how you find out what's inside, a list of dreams. One where she walks alone through a desert, a man's voice echoing behind her but never reaching. Another where she holds a lotus, its petals made of gold and ash. And one where she wears no crown, only a simple cloak, and lives by the river without a name. The dreams are haunting. But what haunts you more is that she had them written down at all. One final discovery. Tucked into the niche beside her bathing chamber, you find a bit of broken alabaster. It was once a perfume jar, etched faintly along the rim. Just one word in hieratic script, his. Not a name, just a claim. Soft and quiet as breath. And then, like a lotus closing at dusk, she begins to vanish from the record. No more scrolls. No more temple visits. No more letters. Some say she fell ill. Others say she took a vow of ritual silence. But those who really watched her, they knew. She had buried something. Not just desire, but defiance. You now walk through palace halls that echo differently, quieter. Like a great story paused mid-sentence, waiting for someone centuries later to pick it up again and ask, what really happened? The wind through the Valley of the Kings hisses like a whisper across the centuries. Sand shifts under your sandals, smoothing away footprints almost as quickly as you leave them. You've been here before many times, but now, after everything you've seen, the hills feel different, like they're holding something tighter. Like they've decided you're ready to see the last layer. You duck into a narrow tomb, one that's rarely visited. Not one of the great pharaohs. Not even listed on most tourist maps. The cartouche above the entrance is chiseled out, just blank stone. But inside, the paintings are oddly fresh. A woman seated on a low stool, combing her hair in the presence of Hathor. Not a goddess herself, not depicted as one, just a woman, human, real. You sit there on the dusty floor and feel the quiet build up like fog in your chest. This was her. You're sure of it. She outlived him, the pharaoh. That much is known. While his mummy was discovered poorly preserved and hastily entombed, hers is still a mystery. No confirmed burial site, no funerary texts, no golden mask, just pieces, fragments of wall art, broken alabaster jars, and that one deeply scratched name on a potsherd found miles away in a worker's graveyard. Not in hieroglyphs, no, to formal, just quick, hurried hieratic. But it reads, daughter, wife of the throne, light of the two lands. Historians still argue whether this refers to her or another royal woman. But something in your gut says, it's hers, it's always been hers. Now, let's zoom out. You already know the pure blood obsession was real. Egyptian royalty often married within the family, full sisters, half-sisters, even nieces. The divine rule needed divine continuity. And nothing said unbroken lineage from Ra like marrying your own daughter. But even among such traditions, this case stuck out. The evidence is slim. It always is with these kinds of stories. There's no surviving official decree saying Pharaoh X wed his daughter because he liked her poetry. But when you look at burial patterns, shared tombs, familial titles, and those two tender inscriptions tucked into temple corners, something starts to emerge. You see, most pharaohs had many wives, political alliances, of course, and heirs, but the title great, royal wife was reserved for just one. And in this case, that wife was his daughter. Modern scholars have tried to sanitize the whole thing, calling it symbolic, ceremonial, even ritualistically platonic. But come on, you were there. You heard the queen's breath catch when he entered the room. You saw the way her eyes flicked toward the priest, then snapped away when her father-husband raised an eyebrow. Platonic, this was not, but it was complicated. She wasn't powerless. She was educated, poetic, devout. She orchestrated festivals. She supervised temple renovations. She consulted with scribes. She was both revered and feared. But still, she was trapped, and she knew it. She tried to rewrite her ending, quietly, without scandal. A scroll buried here, a jar etched there, a prayer misdirected on purpose. She left a trail not of rebellion, but of refusal. A refusal to be forgotten. Centuries later, a European archaeologist in the early 1900s finds a fragment of a diadem near Karnak. It bears the cobra of Wadjet, goddess of Lower Egypt, but the name beneath it doesn't match any known queen. Just a single character, repeated, the hieroglyph her beloved. No one knows what to do with it. Another fragment, this one a bit of faience jewelry, shows a woman holding both the ankh and the crook, symbols of life and rulership. Scholars whisper, argue, delete footnotes, then quietly slide it into the unattributed pile. Yet they remember. In museums now, behind dim glass and half-certain placards, her pieces resurface. Possibly 18th dynasty. Unknown royal woman. Inscription undeciphered, but you know better. Even the erasures tell her story. The scratched out cartouches, the broken jars, the figure painted over in the mural behind the throne. Every attempt to blot her from memory did the opposite. They made her unmistakable. And as you leave the tomb tracing your fingers over cool stone, you realize something. You followed her through every chamber, every shadow, every whispered scroll. You've watched her grow from daughter to queen to memory. And somehow, she's still here. Even now, in the 21st century. When someone says that Pharaoh who married his own daughter, it always ends in a shrug. What was her name again? But you'll remember it. Or if not her name, then her presence. The smell of lotus oil. The glint of shell gold on linen. The sound of a heartbeat when a priest steps too close. And that's enough. Because stories like hers were never meant to be shouted. They were meant to be whispered. So now, you lie back. The sand still warm beneath your palms. Even as the stars rise above the Nile in your mind's eye, everything slows. The rush of ritual. The whisper of papyrus, the hush of incense behind temple walls, it all begins to fade like smoke curling upward from an extinguished oil lamp. You breathe in deep, letting the still air settle inside your chest. Somewhere, in the hush between centuries, the great wife exhales too. Maybe her story wasn't meant to be grand. Maybe it wasn't meant to be celebrated at all. But even in erasure, she left her mark. You saw her in shadows, in side rooms, in scratched pottery and fading murals. She walked beside you in silence, never pleading to be remembered, only to be understood. And now that you've carried her story, even just for tonight, you've done something powerful. You've made space for a woman whom history tried to silence. And in doing so, you've softened the silence itself. So let the sands drift again. Let the tomb seal. Let the wind settle into its ancient rhythm. Your breath slows. Your eyelids grow heavy. And the ancient desert, ever patient, ever waiting, curls around you like a linen wrap. Sleep comes like a tide, and shower forgotten queen smiles.